Former UFC heavyweight champion turned free agent Francis Ngannou is still without an organization. However, he could soon be headed to one championship. Francis was stunningly released from the UFC after contract negotiations fell through, and since that day, fans and pundits alike have been watching closely to see where the Predator will go next, with many thinking that he may be headed to the boxing ring. One CEO, Chatri Sichodong, says that ONE have been engaged in talks with Francis for a long time now, and there are plans for a sit-down meeting. Speaking to Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour, Chatri said, "He has a bunch of offers on the table. He's waiting for our final offer. I'm going to meet Francis this Saturday in Los Angeles. He and I will sit down and talk, and for sure, ONE can give him the biggest offer on the table out of all of his bids. But it has to work for him. It has to work for us. I just believe that meeting somebody, you get the energy." I think there's going to be big news on Francis shortly, and I think he's taking his time. From the few interactions I've had with Francis, he's very thoughtful and methodical and careful. At the same time, he's a very principled man. That's one thing I've learned about him. He's very principled. He does things on principle. A dollar here, a dollar there won't sway him. It's principles. That's what's very admirable about him. At the same time, I do believe the world is his oyster. I do believe he's a big pay-per-view draw in boxing or in MMA. Chatri continued by discussing the fact that ONE could offer him more opportunities than the UFC, given their promotion of multiple fight disciplines, saying, "If we did boxing, we would be the co-promoter with him. One of the big differences at ONE versus a UFC is a comparison point. At ONE, we offer multiple disciplines. It's not just mixed martial arts." So we had a WBC boxing world title before in ONE. I think it was in 2017 or 2018. It was a regular ONE show. You saw Muay Thai, you saw the grappling, you saw MMA, and we had a boxing world title fight. So the platform we've built, we really want the best fighters on the planet. Surprisingly, Chatri went on to say that whilst the world is Ngannou's oyster, he thinks the Predator could potentially struggle against many of the top opponents in the ONE heavyweight division, saying, "I think he'll have a tough time in our heavyweight division, to be frank, which I've said publicly, and I think it's a big challenge for Francis. When you look at a guy like Anatoly Malikin, who's 12-0, was a former Russian national team wrestler, one-punch KO power. He's 12-0 with an 80% finish rate. That is the worst nightmare to face in a big striker like Ngannou. But at the same time, Francis has an X-factor. He's a giant monster. A rising star like Marcus Buchecha. I think he's 5-0 or 6-0 in ONE. He is arguably the greatest grappler of all time. He's a 13-time, 14-time Jiu-Jitsu world champion. He's run through all opponents. He has incredible wrestling. That kind of style is a nightmare for Francis. That's just a rising star within the heavyweight division. It would certainly be interesting to see Francis continue his MMA career in another organization like ONE, and is a win-win for ONE in general. They either get a new pay-per-view draw in a massive name like Francis Ngannou, or he gets beaten by one of the existing ONE-rostered heavyweights, which makes the UFC look bad by comparison that their best heavyweight couldn't hang in ONE FC. Would you like to see Francis make the move to ONE FC? Would you prefer him to eat humble pie and go back to the UFC? Or go into the boxing world? Let me know in the comments. Retired UFC lightweight turned commentator Paul Felder has issued an apology to Bobby Green for his overly emotional and slightly biased reaction to what happened at UFC Vegas 71 over the weekend. There was a slightly chaotic series of events on Saturday night as entertaining UFC lightweight Bobby Green seemingly dropped Jared Gordon and followed up with strikes on the ground, forcing the referee to step in. However, after a review of the tape, it was clear that the knockdown was due to a clash of heads and the fight was ruled a no contest. As the events were unfolding in the cage, commentator Paul Felder was clearly having an emotional response to the footage given how close he is with Gordon. Bobby Green was obviously upset, having what he thought was going to be a KO victory turned into a no contest during a whirlwind of events. And he went on to the MMA Hour to air his grievances with how Paul Felder was reacting throughout the whole process, basically saying that Paul Felder better know what time it is when they see each other. Well, Paul Felder has responded to the whole situation with a tweet of his own, saying, "I understand the criticism. I got emotional. It was a friend, but it was also a pretty awful clash of heads that almost resulted in a TKO. I respect Green as a fighter. I do apologize for letting my emotions into play, but there is no need for threats. You don't have to like me." As the events were unfolding in the cage on Saturday night, it was a confusing and chaotic time, and I think most fans have sympathy for both Felder and Green. It would have been difficult to remain unemotional when seeing your friend and training partner blatantly knocked down with a headbutt. And it would have been equally difficult for Green to come out of a crazy exchange thinking he had won the fight, only to have it taken away. How do you see the whole situation? And do you side with either man more than the other? Would you like to see Jared Gordon and Bobby Green run it back? Let me know in the comments below. It's a bit of a tired MMA trope at this point, but this is another story about whether Conor McGregor will ever fight again. This time it's colourful MMA pundit Chael Sonnen, and he says that the topic of discussing whether McGregor is done in the sport is apparently fair game, despite the fact that McGregor just coached The Ultimate Fighter and has a fight teed up with Michael Chandler. Speaking on a recent video on his YouTube channel, Sonnen stated, "I do think that topic is fair game. It's certainly not what we've been told is going to happen with Conor. We know nothing. We know that there's no match, no way against Chandler, no 155 pounds or 170 pounds, no training camp in Big Bear that they're in the middle of. Nothing we've been told is accurate, but that's okay. At some point, Chandler is going to wake up and realize that I don't have a fight coming up with Conor, which means I don't have a fight coming up at all." Whilst announcements regarding the matchup between McGregor and Chandler have been uncharacteristically quiet, in true McGregor fashion, he has constantly been dropping hints about the fight, saying in a brief interview in Las Vegas at the Davis-Garcia fight that his matchup with Chandler is set for some time at the end of summer. McGregor at this point is 1-3 in the last 6 years, so it's not crazy to think he may never fight again, especially given his most recent leg injury that could be a long-term issue. Do you agree with Chael Sonnen's take that there is a possibility McGregor won't step back into the octagon? If and when he does, do you think he will get up over Michael Chandler? Let me know in the comments. That's all the MMA water cooler talk for today. Thanks for watching Undisputed MMA, and be sure to hit the like button and subscribe as it really helps me grow the channel. See you next week for the latest news in MMA and the UFC.